What should you actually keep in checking versus savings? And this may sound like a really simple idea, but I've talked to so many people, and including myself, when you first start out budgeting, it's really, it feels like it's a question that you should already know the answer to, but it's actually a little bit harder to determine how much you should have in your checking versus your savings. So that's what this video is going to be all about, depending on if you have debt, if you're working towards savings goals, and kind of your tolerance for how much you actually have sitting in that checking account, and a couple things that you can do. Welcome, this is Finance Sister, and my name is Anna, and this is my channel where we talk about everything related to money, having a balanced lifestyle, and reaching financial freedom. Please don't forget to subscribe and like this button. So a lot of this is going to depend on how you choose to budget and if you're actually budgeting consistently. So I know that for a lot of people, when you first start or when you're thinking of creating and sticking to a budget, it can take approximately 3 months to really get a good idea of how your categories line up with what you think you're going to be spending versus what you actually spend. So for those months, I would definitely suggest having a little bit more in checking than you decide on having in there for the first part, especially if you don't have overdraft protection for going directly towards your savings, because you don't want to have to deal with those overdraft fees for no good reason. Another thing that's going to make this kind of vary for how much you should have in your checking versus savings is if you budget bi-weekly every time you get paid, or if it's monthly. So if you haven't already watched it, go ahead and check out my budgeting by paycheck video, where I basically go in depth on how you can maintain this whole checking versus savings accounts amounts and how it's really beneficial, especially for those who are not always super great about keeping tabs on what your actual expenses are every month. If you have a little bit more of like a high level view and you just kind of want a good idea of how much you're actually putting towards savings every month, then this might be a great idea of checking that video out and making sure that you're transferring money either automatically through your paycheck system or manually every time that you get paid. The best way to address exactly how you want to budget is by deciding, okay, I know that I get paid weekly, every other week, or monthly, and that's how I'm going to structure the way that I'm consistently keeping money in checking versus savings, when I'm paying on debt, etc. A good rule of thumb is to basically keep 2 weeks of expenses plus approximately like a $300 to $500 buffer for any future expenses that are going to be unexpected but not an emergency. And then the rest you would want to keep in a savings account so that you can clearly see, okay, this is how much I have for my emergency fund or for savings categories, and then what's in my checking is what I'm actually operating on in any given month. Doing this will allow you to clearly see how much you should be actually living on per month and not be going over too much on your budget, so that you know if you're pulling from your savings account and you still have that $300 buffer or whatever you choose it to be, then you're going over on a few categories and you need to figure out where you're going wrong. And that'll also kind of notify you if you're not very good at consistently keeping track on a budgeting app or a spreadsheet or with your cash envelopes, whatever. It'll help you understand that you need to go look and see where you're going over. If you're in the process of aggressively paying off debt, which if you've been following my channel or my story at all, then you know that my husband and I actually paid off $67,000 worth of debt in just the last couple months. And we actually didn't keep more than $1,000 as like an emergency fund, but we actually kept it as our buffer in our checking account. So we never actually had more than probably like $2,500 sitting in our checking account at any given time, because as soon as we got paid, we would put all the money that we could towards debt, and then we would keep the rest for our living expenses until the next paycheck or the next month, whatever we decided to do with that, if we wanted to have a little bit more of a cushion for the unexpected expenses. Whenever you do get paid, I would say go ahead and just send the amount of money that you are planning to put towards savings for that paycheck or for that month into the savings account immediately as soon as you get paid. So don't wait for it to just kind of sit there, because then you're going to forget how much you actually wanted to put over there, or it just might not happen. So if you're going to be building savings this way, go check out my best high yield savings accounts for 2020, and I think you'll find that a couple of them will be great options to transfer money. So it's a little bit harder to actually access that money on a regular basis. So you can focus more on cutting back spending where you need to and increasing your savings goal while still gaining interest on that money. So just to recap, if you are in debt, then just keep your $1,000 emergency fund or whatever you choose that to be. If it's going to be a little bit more than that, then I would put the remainder of your emergency fund, if you wanted to have it be, 3 months of expenses or $3,000, whatever you decide on what you're comfortable with, then put that in savings, but then have your go back to the good rule of thumb of having 2 weeks of living expenses plus a $300 buffer until the next time that you get paid. So you're trying to maintain the amount of money that you actually have in checking to just cover your living expenses for that month, plus a little bit of a buffer, so that you can clearly see how much you're actually saving on any given month, even if you kind of drop the ball on tracking all of your expenses during the month. You at least get a better idea of how much you're actually saving or making headway on throughout the month. Your income is your greatest wealth building tool. So when you have debt, that increases your monthly expenses on things that you have to pay for that you already have, but just didn't have the money up front to actually purchase in full, right? So you want to knock that out as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who could also benefit from this information.